I want to tell you about the moment I understood what my family really thought of me. Not a dramatic moment, not a fight, not a cruel word delivered in anger. A number. $10,000, written on a check, handed to my sister on her wedding day with tears and pride and a speech about how much she deserved every happiness in the world. I was standing 3 feet away, smiling, counting. Growing up in my family was like growing up in a house with 2 different weather systems. For my sister Lauren, it was always warm. For me, it depended on the day, on my grades, on whether I had done something to disappoint someone, on factors I could never quite identify, no matter how carefully I observed them. Lauren was the golden child. I know that sounds like something everyone says about their sibling, like a cliché borrowed from a therapy session. But this was documented, literal, mathematical. Lauren's college tuition, fully paid. Mine, half paid, with the expectation that I would cover the rest through loans and part-time work. Lauren's car at 16, brand new. Mine, at 17, used with a payment plan my parents generously offered to split with me. Lauren's apartment deposit when she moved to the city, covered without question. Mine, a conversation about responsibility and independence that somehow concluded with me covering it myself. I had kept track, not out of bitterness, out of survival. When you grow up in an uneven house, you learn very quickly that the only way to protect yourself is to see clearly, to name what is happening, even when everyone around you is pretending it isn't. Lauren's wedding was beautiful. Of course it was. My parents had contributed significantly. Venue, catering, flowers, the kind of wedding that gets photographed and posted and admired. And then at the reception, my father stood up. He gave a speech. He talked about Lauren's kindness, her grace, her light. He cried. My father, a man I had seen cry exactly twice in my life, cried for my sister at her wedding. And then he handed her the envelope. For your future, he said, because you deserve every beautiful thing. $10,000. I clapped with everyone else. I hugged Lauren and told her she looked stunning. I danced at her reception and smiled in every photograph. And on the drive home that night, sitting in the passenger seat while my then-fiancé James drove in silence because he knew me well enough to know I needed quiet, I stared out the window and made a decision. Not revenge, not punishment, truth. When my wedding came, I was going to tell the truth. James and I got engaged 8 months after Lauren's wedding. My parents were happy, genuinely, I think. They loved James. He was stable, kind, professionally successful, the kind of man that parents who care about appearances appreciate immediately. The wedding planning began, and this is where things got interesting. My mother inserted herself immediately. Opinions on venues, catering, guest lists, the energy of a woman who had been waiting for another wedding to plan. I let her. I smiled and nodded and incorporated her suggestions where they made sense, and I planned, very quietly, the one part of the day she didn't know about. 3 weeks before the wedding, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not an angry letter, not a bitter one, an honest one. I wrote about growing up as the second daughter in a house that measured love in visible ways, about the tuition and the car and the apartment deposit, about standing 3 feet from my sister at her wedding, watching my father hand her $10,000 and clapping along with everyone else. I wrote about what it costs to love people who love you unevenly, about the years of trying harder, achieving more, asking for less, not because I was noble, but because I had understood early that the only way to be seen in my family was to become undeniable. I wrote about what I needed them to understand, not what I wanted from them, what I needed them to understand. There is a difference. I also prepared something else, a folder. Inside the folder were documents I had kept over the years, not obsessively, not maliciously, just carefully. The tuition payment records, the car purchase receipts, the text messages about the apartment deposit, the ones where my mother had explained why it wasn't possible right now, and beside each one, a corresponding record for Lauren. Side by side, the same years, the same family, two completely different experiences. I showed it to James the night before the wedding. He read through it quietly. When he finished, he looked up at me. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It's going to change things," he said. "I know," I said. "That's the point." He nodded slowly. Then he took my hand. "Then I'm with you," he said. The ceremony was everything I had wanted. Simple, meaningful, the kind of wedding that feels like the people inside it, rather than a performance for the people watching. James cried when I walked down the aisle. My father walked me to him with his hand on my arm and pride on his face, and I felt, genuinely felt, something soft toward him in that moment. He loved me. I had never doubted that. What I doubted, what I had always doubted, was whether he saw me, truly saw me, not the version of me that achieved things, not the version that required less, not the version that clapped at Lauren's wedding with a smile that cost more than he would ever know. Me. The reception was warm and full, and everything a celebration should be. My mother had outdone herself with the flowers. I told her so. I meant it. Lauren gave a toast that made half the room cry and made me genuinely laugh. And then my father stood up. I watched him from across the room. He straightened his jacket, picked up his glass, smiled at James's parents at the adjacent table. He gave a speech. It was lovely. He talked about watching me grow up, about my determination, about how proud he was. He did not cry. I noticed. And then he reached into his jacket pocket. I held my breath. He produced an envelope. "For your future," he said, "because you deserve every happiness." The same words, word for word. I opened the envelope at the table. Inside was a check. I looked at the number. $2,000. James's hand found mine under the table. He squeezed once. I squeezed back. "It's okay," the squeeze said. "You knew. You're ready." I folded the check back into the envelope. I placed it carefully in my small bridal bag, and I stood up. I had not planned to speak. James had offered to do it, to stand up and redirect the evening before anything landed too heavily. But I had thought about it for 8 months, and I had decided that if this was going to happen, if this truth was going to be spoken, it was going to be spoken by me, in my own voice, on my own wedding day. I tapped my glass. The room quieted. I smiled, genuinely, warmly, at the faces looking back at me. "I want to say something," I said, "and I want to say it with love, because everything I'm about to say comes from love." I looked at my parents. My mother's expression flickered. My father went still. "I have spent a lot of years," I said, "trying to understand the difference between being loved and being seen, because I know my parents love me. I have never doubted that." I paused. "But love and equity are not the same thing, and I think it's time our family understood that." I kept it short. I did not produce the folder. That was never the plan. The folder was for me, proof that I was not imagining what I had lived. I simply said what was true, that I had watched a different standard applied to me and my sister throughout our lives, that I had absorbed it quietly because I loved my family and did not want to damage what we had. that I had reached a point where silence felt like dishonesty to myself and to them. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm not asking for anything to be repaid. I'm asking for something harder than that. I'm asking to be seen, fully, equally, starting today." The room was very quiet. My mother cried. My father sat with his hands folded on the table for a long time. Lauren found me an hour later in the venue garden. She didn't say much. She just hugged me. And in that hug was something I hadn't expected. Recognition. The acknowledgement of a sister who had always known, on some level, that the weather in our house had been different for each of us. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's not yours to be sorry for," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry anyway." My father called 3 days after the wedding. He talked for a long time. It was not a perfect conversation. It was not a full resolution. Real things rarely resolve in single conversations. But it was honest. For the first time in my memory, genuinely, uncomfortably, courageously honest. That was enough to begin. People ask if I regret it. Speaking at my own wedding, making it complicated, choosing truth over comfort on a day that was supposed to be simple. I don't, because here is what I know. The people who love you deserve your honesty more than they deserve your performance. My parents are learning that. So am I. James held my hand through every minute of that day. He is still holding it. And that, I have decided, is the only number that has ever mattered.